أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين ورحمة للعالمين سيدنا ونبينا وشفيع ذنوبنا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا مولانا أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
ثم الصلاة والسلام على آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. وقال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا عليكم أنفسكم صدق الله العظيم. صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
My mothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
The topic that we have been discussing for this month of Muharram is the spiritual path to emotional intelligence. And just to give you a very brief recap on what we've been talking about, we've been talking about how in the West, when we talk about intelligence, we have different kinds of intelligence. We have IQ, which is our mental intelligence. Then recently people came up with the term EQ, right? Emotional intelligence, which means how we manage and control our emotions and how we relate to other people. In Islam, however, the concept of intelligence is very different. When we talk about aql, it means it's a very holistic concept, and it includes how you use your mind to live your life in the best way possible, to put it in a very brief nutshell, right? So when we talk about the spiritual path to emotional intelligence, what we're talking about is how we can use all our faculties, our emotions, our intelligence, all of it to recognize that He, that is Allah, is the highest level of intelligence, and the kind of guidance that He has given to us will help us not only succeed in this world, but in the hereafter as well. Okay? And we've been talking about how emotions fit into this. And what we've been discussing is that God does not want us to be emotionless. In other words, the believer's heart is one which is full of emotion. So when you're full of emotion, it means that you are gentle, you're soft, you're vulnerable, you're likely to get hurt, right? However, a sign of emotions is the sign of an alive heart. When the Quran talks about the disbelievers, it talks about how their heart is void of any emotion, how it is a hard heart. And this is not what God wants from us. So the idea is that, and the Quran, by the way, uses emotion in many different ways, and we've been discussing this over the season, why the Quran is still relevant after 1400 years. It's not because it's simply a book which has got rules and laws in it, right? It is because it appealed to the emotions, to the heart of people then, and it still appeals to our emotions. And of course, there are many, many beautiful examples of that. However, what we do need to do is we need to have a balance in our emotions. When we are feeling our emotion, we need to realize that we do not need to act on every emotion. Because when we do that, as we know in our own lives, I'm sure we've all experienced that when we let our emotions get the better of us, whether it is the emotion of excitement, love, happiness, or sadness and upset, it can sometimes lead us down a path where we don't want to go. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. So this is what we've been talking about, how to have this balance. And what we have been also talking about is that basically we need 5 skills in order to manage our emotions in the best way possible. The first one is that of self-awareness. Self-awareness means if I don't know what I'm feeling, if I don't know how my feelings are getting in the way of my life, then I can't really take the next step, right? So for example, if I know about myself that, I have this problem of getting upset or getting maybe too excited and jumping in before I've thought things through, then if I have that self-awareness, then I can see, okay, what can I do about it, right? Secondly, we need emotional regulation. What does emotional regulation mean? Again, the problem is not that we have emotions. The problem is that sometimes our thinking brain is not engaged with our emotions, right? And it is not an easy thing. And today, inshallah, we will be talking about, emotional regulation of anger. Because anger, as I don't know about you, but sometimes I have a problem with anger, right? I'll give you a very small example. So I only came into town yesterday. And of course, as soon as I knew I had so many things to do, so I landed and I ran quickly to the immigration line. And as Toronto airport is, it was very, very busy. So we're standing in the line, and what they're doing is, instead of letting people go from the front to the immigration officer, which is what should happen, right? What they started doing was opening the thing from the middle and letting people off. It wasn't really any system. So those of us who were waiting in the front ended up waiting a lot longer than the people who were behind us. Now, I know maybe you are much more patient than I am, but I noticed myself getting really upset at this. Why? Because I said it shouldn't be like this. I'm the one who ran and I, tried to get first in line, and why isn't my turn coming first, right? So can you see how if I'm thinking like this, if I'm not in charge or if I don't notice it immediately, I'm likely to do things and say things which will not be to my best interest. Does that make sense? Yes. So of course, because I was supposed to speak today about anger, I noticed this quite quickly, right? And I talked myself through it. But so today let's talk a little bit about what that means. So we're going to understand the emotion of anger. First of all, why have we been given it? If we're only supposed to suppress it and deal with it and control it, what's the purpose? Like, why have we been given this? And then, how do we go about managing it? And, what does obviously the Quran and Hadith guide us? So let's begin. There's a very famous verse in Surah Al Imran, which many of us may know, where Allah says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Allazina yunfiquna fis sarra'i wa zarra'i wa kazimina al-ghayzi wal afiyana an-nas wallahu yuhibbul muhsinin. Beautiful verse, right? The translation is those who spend in His way in time of plenty and in time of hardship. So in the beginning, it's not talking about anger, right? It's talking about giving out of what you have. It's talking about, when you're giving charity, it should not only depend on when you have plenty. So the people who Allah loves are those, even when they're feeling constrained, when they themselves may feel that they don't have enough, they still give out of what they have. And hold in check their anger and pardon their fellow men. And Allah loves the doers of good to others, right? Allah loves the muhsinin. So this ayat is very beautiful. Why? Because it gives us a very good motivation on why we should work on our anger. Because right off the bat, it's telling us that if we do it, if we keep our anger in check, it will lead to Allah's pleasure. It will lead to Him loving us, okay? Now, interestingly, the word used is ghaiz. There's 2 words for anger in Arabic. One is ghaiz and one is ghazal. So the difference that ulama explained is ghaiz is the inner feeling. When I'm getting irritated, when I'm standing in that line and I can feel myself getting upset. That's ghaiz. When I start acting out that, when I say things which are nasty to people, or I, bang something, or I show my anger, that is ghazal. Okay, so obviously in this verse, Allah is talking about ghaiz. It is talking that when you have that emotion of anger, that's when we need to start managing it. And as we'll see, why this is such good advice. Okay. So why have we been given this anger in any case? Sometimes when we see animals acting ferocious, like have you ever heard a dog barking and it sounds really angry, right? Or you see a snake hissing, or you see, if you step by mistake on a squirrel's tail, for example, it'll go crazy, right? We'll get really upset. However, what experts explain is that that's not really anger. It is fear, and the animal is reacting out of fear. Human beings are the only ones who are capable of anger. Why? Because anger has to do with how you are thinking about something. So for example, let's take that example of when I was standing in line again, right? If I'm standing in line and I'm not really thinking about, I'm busy on my phone or checking my emails or whatever, it's not going to make a difference to me who's going ahead of me, right? What is making me angry is the thought process that is telling me that this is what I expected and what I expected is not coming true, number one. Or I tell myself my goal is to get out of this airport as soon as possible so I can go home, and somebody or something is interfering in my goal, right? And if you think about, why you get angry, it's literally one of those two reasons. It is because you expected something that didn't happen, or you feel that, things should be a certain way, you want to do something and something is standing in your way, right? Now, what ulama explained to us, and Ayatollah Khomeini has done a really good job in his exposition of the 40 hadith, so he's got a long hadith about anger. And he says that the reason why Allah has put this faculty in us, it is because it ensures the continuity of the species. It is related to the safety of the individual and the family, and it helps with defending against encroachment about rights and dealing with an unfair or unjust system, right? So now again, when you think about it, anger gives you very important information about how things should be, right? When we know that, for example, and by the way, in Islam, the opposite, like if you have no anger in you, if you have no passion in you, that's actually a disease of the soul, and it's called cowardice, right? So for example, if you go and you see a little child being bullied, right? Or you see a parent really getting very upset at a young child, or actually showing aggression towards the child, and nothing happens to you. You don't phase out at all. There's something wrong with that. Because when we see an injustice happening and we stand by and do nothing, or we don't even feel anything, Islam considers that to be a disease of the soul. So the balance in the emotion of anger is called courage. Courage means that you use your anger as an alarm system or an information to you. It's giving you a message that something's not quite right, and that something needs to change, okay? And that's why we say that, getting angry with for the right reason, with the right person, in the right amount. That's what we're looking for. Now, obviously, this is really not that easy to do, okay? Why? Because obviously our own issues come in. So when we're threatened, for example, when somebody threatens our safety, then obviously we get angry and we lash out. However, a lot of times it's not our physical safety that's attacked. What is it that's attacked? Any ideas? Ego. That's exactly it, right? I think that people are attacking me and they're attacking my self-esteem or dignity. And in my mind, I have a whole conversation that how dare they do this? So you cannot really get angry until you find somebody to blame. And that's the issue with anger, that when we are reacting on a basis of ego, we are usually blaming other people for how we're feeling, right? So say, for example, I go somewhere and, now that I'm getting older, say I go on a bus or something, and I expect that, a young man who looks like a Muslim, seems perfectly healthy, he sees me, I've got heavy bags in my hand and doesn't get up, right? Now, if I tell myself in my mind that it shouldn't be like this, and how dare he, and children today, they're just not brought up properly, right? So we can make all sorts of stories in our head which are going to make me angry. Now, if I didn't even notice it and I didn't expect anything, I just stood there, it wouldn't make me angry. Does that make sense? Okay. So now, how can anger be good for you? Like I said, that anger gives you a signal that something needs to change. Let's take an example from a personal relationship. So, how many of us like to do dishes? Nobody. It's very therapeutic. It can be, Like, mundane tasks like ironing, doing dishes, doing vacuuming. If we do them with the right attitude, they can be really good opportunities to practice mindfulness, right? However, I guess no one here likes to do dishes. So say, for example, you had both come, you were working, your husband was working, you came home, and after dinner, he sat down and started watching football or whatever he wanted to on TV, where you were left to do the dishes. So now you're in the kitchen, you have soap on your hands, and what are you thinking at this point?
How come I am doing it?
How come I'm doing the dishes? Are you having really loving thoughts about him? No.
Not at all.
So you're probably getting a little bit angry, right? Now, what options do you have to deal with this anger? So one you could do, I have to suppress this anger. I just have to swallow it, and that's what Islam expects of me. That's your first option. So you go once you're done, you go and do you think your suppression will show on your face?
Yes.
Yeah? Do you think he'll be able to tell that you're upset at something? Okay. So he asks you, what's wrong, honey? Why are you so upset? And what do you say?
Nothing.
Nothing. That's what we always say, right? So that's our first option. Our second option is that you make no bones about the fact that you're really angry. You take the dishes, you go in the thing, and you fling some on the wall, right? And some of them break, and it gives a very clear message that you're very angry. Okay, something related to the dishes, but he may still not get it. Okay, let me tell you. That's your second option. What's your third option? Do you have a third option? Sorry?
Just finish the work happily.
Sorry? Okay, yes. To actually calm yourself down first, and then to have a conversation about it, that listen, something needs to change in our relationship. I'm working like you, and I'm having trouble. I'm having it hard without doing all of this without help, right? Most of the time when we're very upset, though, we can't think of option number 3, right? We think either we have to suck it up, we just have to swallow the anger and be good Muslim women. And of course, we are fooling ourselves, because at the end of the day, they get it, right? People around us can tell that we're upset about something unless we're like really spiritually evolved. And if you are, please share it with others as well, okay, how you're doing this. But most of the time, we don't see the third option. Now, let's look at how anger makes changes in the world. Say you are, in your neighborhood, there's a stop sign which nobody obeys. Right? Everyone goes and you have children, the other children, neighbors' children play on the street. And every time a car passes by and doesn't stop, you get really angry. And while you're getting angry, what you're doing, you're giving that car mental tickets. So every time they go, you're like so angry, you're working yourself up, but you're not doing anything about it, right? Again, that's not a healthy way to deal with anger. However, if you really wanted to make a change, you could use that anger as information that something needs to change. If you went and spoke to your local police department, or put up signs that children playing here, or do something positive about it, can you see how it would be a really good use of how you're feeling, right? Similarly, we know there's so many social movements, MAD, which actually stands for MADD, right? Mothers Against Drunk Driving. How did they start? It's because one of their children got killed because of a drunk driver. So they use their anger in a really positive way. And many social movements for social services, they start like that because people who've experienced something don't want others to experience it, right? I mean, Nelson Mandela is a huge example. So he saw apartheid, he couldn't deal with it, and he used his anger in a positive way and changed the whole course of history. So, however, a lot of times we do not do this, right? We have what is called an unhealthy relationship with anger. And what is that unhealthy relationship? So what happens is that when we are feeling something, the reason why anger is so hard to deal with is because it gives us a big boost of energy. So say if I just tell you something, you think about, like, just stop for a moment and think about someone you're really mad at, okay? You will get a burst in energy. You will get, there's many different ways. So your body will be flooded with hormones which are leading you to believe that you're powerful. And there's a good biological reason for that. If you are being attacked, Allah has prepared your body perfectly so that when you feel angry, you can defend yourself. Or you can run away, or you can do whatever you need to do, right? So, this is the problem. So you get a burst of energy and then it goes away. How do we keep it going though? We keep that burst of energy going by getting into the negative thought patterns. So say for example, I look at that person every day, who breaks the stop sign, okay? So when I think about it, it's giving me a burst of energy, I'm getting upset. Then what I do is I start thinking about all the ways that people break the rules like they shouldn't. Okay? So now what's happening is that my thoughts are acting as triggers for more anger to be born. And each time I think that, it's going to lead to more and more anger until I become addicted to this. It's actually, anger can be very addictive. Why? Because it makes you feel powerful. It also makes you completely focused on other people. It completely blinds you to what you can do. So if I spend my time blaming somebody else for how I'm feeling, what am I not doing? I'm not looking at how I'm contributing to the issue, or I am not looking at how I can make changes. So let's take the example of the washing dishes again, right? If I take the second option or the first option and keep thinking about, not only does he not help me with the dishes, here's all the ways that my husband is not fulfilling my expectations as a spouse, right? And then what happens? That every time I see him, am I going to be feeling happy or angry? So it becomes like a trigger. Every time I see him, I get angry, I have the same negative thought patterns repeating again and again, and it stops me from seeing how I am contributing to my own issues, right? So, anger also numbs pain. How does it do that? It has an analgesic effect, like it's the same thing like taking a painkiller, for example. So for example, if when athletes get hurt, athletes need to work themselves up quite a bit in order to win. And if you watch tennis or whatever, you see how it's more of because they're all equal, all of them are really good. So the one who has the most mental ability tends to win because they're playing their opponent, or they're getting angry with them, they're working themselves up. A lot of times when athletes get hurt, they don't realize it. Why? Because they're in that state where their body is full of the chemicals which is not allowing them to feel pain. Now again, this is normal, if you are being attacked or if you're in war, for example, okay? What is not useful is when we use anger to suppress when we've been hurt. And so again, let me give you an example. Say, anyone here who has older children? Okay. So very often, because I'm at that stage, this is the example I like to use these days. a lot of us who don't have our children living with us, we miss them, right? And we really miss them, and we wish they would call more often, we wish they would visit more often, right? So when they call us though, what do we, is that how we communicate with them? Do we say, I'm really missing you? What do we normally say? We get angry with them, right? You never call mother, who thinks of the mother, and I just gave birth to you, whatever, right? We can come up with all sorts of reasons, right? Now, what is the problem with that? When we are giving them this message, what are we not dealing with? We're not dealing with the pain. We're trying to, cover it up with anger. But if we just allow ourselves to communicate from what's really going on, can you see how our relationships would be different, right? It does take some vulnerability though. It takes the idea that I may tell my child that, I really miss you. I wish you would visit more often. And they may still not visit as much as we would like, right? Can we have a salawat?
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
I hope that baby's okay. Sounds quite distressed. Okay. So now when we get into this cycle of anger, this is what we call problematic anger, right? So we have a hadith of Imam Ali alayhi salam.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Anger is a stroke of madness, since the afflicted later feels remorse and regret. If someone does not feel any remorse after anger, it means that his anger has become fixed, right? What does this mean? So generally, when we say something's in anger, we usually do regret it. If we've told off our child or had a fight with our spouse and we've said some things that we don't really mean, we do feel regret later. In order to deal with that regret, if we turn to blaming the other person, that's how the madness, quote unquote, becomes fixed. Because the more I do that, the more I blame others for causing me upset, the less likely I am going to look at my own circumstance or my own role in doing what needs to be done. So this kind of anger, obviously we know, is a vicious cycle, right? It's remorse, regret. We try not to deal with the regret and remorse, so we blame the other person and we get more and more angry. Obviously, we know that this has a very negative effect on our personal and professional relationships because no one likes to be around an angry person, right? And by the way, for mothers, this is extremely important information. Why? Because mothers are the ones who set the emotional tone of their home. If mothers are happy, they have a happy home. If mothers are angry or not happy or blaming other people, can you see how people in that home cannot really be happy? So it's very, very important for us as mothers to take this seriously. Anger is really bad for our physical and mental health. Women particularly, and by the way, suppression is as bad as, overt expression, right? That's why we really have to deal with it. In the sense that women who don't deal with anger and who either suppress it too much or express it tend to get depression quite often, okay? And I'm not saying that's the only reason for depression, I'm saying it is one of the risk factors. Men, on the other hand, when they tend to be, continuously acting out on anger, again, it's called the heart attack emotion for a reason, right? Because it does suppress your immunity, it increases your blood pressure, and it is a negative effect on your thing, right? That's why we have a hadith which says anger is the key that opens the door to all sorts of vices. So now, what do we do? How can we learn to manage this emotion or use it in the way that it was meant, right? We need to recognize firstly that we have three components of anger. First is what we feel and how we experience it in the body. So we know that when we're angry, what do we feel? What is happening inside our body? Let's go off our thought for 1 second, right? Any ideas what happens to you when you're angry? Blood pressure goes up, but how do you feel? What happens? What are you feeling inside?
Burned up.
Sorry? Burnt up. So it's like a distress, right? What else? Trembling. Okay, what else? So let's focus on physical sensations.
You hate someone.
You hate someone, so what goes on in your body when you're hating someone?
You're sweating.
Okay, you're sweating. You might be feeling upset stomach, you may have a knot in your stomach. Sometimes you're so angry you feel like your head's going to burst, right? These are really important clues for us to know. Because very often what happens is we think, oh, it came out of nowhere. But it never comes out of nowhere. When we are getting angry, we are usually not aware of what our body is doing. If we become aware, like we begin to notice, I'm getting tightness around my shoulders, there's a throbbing in my temple, I'm beginning to get a headache, I can be much more in tune that I need to address this before it goes, before it reacts too much. The second component of anger is how we think about it. What are the thoughts that are happening? So let's take a very, quick example. Say your child in the morning, everyone's rushing and you have a small child at home and they drop milk just as you're about to leave. They're having cereal, they're having breakfast and they drop milk all over the table, okay? Now imagine that in this time you're thinking about they're always doing this, they're never ready on time, they are, I tell them to be careful, no one listens to me. Now on a scale from 0 to 10, where is your anger?
10.
Okay, 10. Anybody else? 4 to 5. Okay, now just let that go for a second. Now same situation, right? So the child drops the milk and you tell yourself, children make mistakes. That's what happens. This poor child, she just struggles with clumsiness, so she's trying really hard and maybe she was trying to hurry up so that we wouldn't be late and she spilled the milk. Now on a scale from 0 to 100, 0 to 10, where is your anger? 1 or 2, right? Can you see that the situation is exactly the same? What is the difference?
Thinking.
It is how you are talking to yourself during that event, right? So, and the third part of anger is how we act or express it, right? So, what does not work in anger management? Have you heard of the term venting? Right? Venting means what? Just letting it all out. So expressing how angry you are at someone. And in the old days, psychologists used to say, yes, it's a really good idea, just vent it out. Just let people say how you are feeling. Thankfully, therapists have come a long way since then. And now, what they're recognizing is that venting actually does nothing to allay anger. Why? Because exactly what we've been talking about. When we are in that thought loop and we are replaying what happened, it is giving us more fodder, right? So our thoughts are getting angry, and even if, say, something happened yesterday and I let it go. Today, if I tell you about it, I'm going to get into the same state that I was yesterday, right? And you will probably tell me, oh, yes, that was terrible, and it will add fuel to the fire, right? So venting does not work. Also, only relying on willpower does not work. Willpower means, I like to call it white knuckling it. White knuckling means what? If you're really trying to do something, say if you're going to have an injection or surgery, right? And they give you no anesthesia, and they say just bear it. And you hold your fist in, and you become, you lose blood in it. You're holding it so tight, and you're white knuckling it, right? Through willpower. That doesn't work. Why? Because again, you're not using any skills. You're just trying to rely on willpower and eventually it's going to blow up, right? And also only information doesn't help. So whatever I'm telling you, actually unless you practice it, it's not going to help. That's the bad news, okay? So what does work? What does work is to first recognize that you're getting angry. The earlier you recognize it, the more chance you have Because what happens is that as you get more and more angry, it is like, ulama actually explain, it is as if like there's a fire in the cave. So if there's a fire in the cave, the smoke is filling up, and there's no place to escape. And they explain that this is how the person, you lose reason, right? Your thinking mind is actually not operational at that time. It is called an emotional hijacking, right? So the earlier you catch the anger, the best chance you have to deal with it. Now, suppose you don't catch it and it's already too late, right? Then the best thing is to distance yourself from the situation rather than remain in it. In other words, take a time out. Take a time out and tell yourself that you need to cool down, that I need to cool down. So say if you're in the middle of an argument, what does not work is if your spouse is losing it and you tell your spouse you need to cool down, right? If you tell anybody calm down and they're angry, do they calm down? What happens?
Get more angry.
They get more angry, right? And that's why let's not even tell each other. The worst way to deal with someone who's angry is to tell them to calm down. However, what Hadith tells us that works is when you have a close relationship and the person is losing it, you go and you touch them gently. This is in Hadith, that a gentle healing touch can really calm the other person down, even if you don't say anything. Okay? And we all know the famous Hadith where it says that when you are standing, you sit down. If you're sitting, you lie down. What this essentially means is that you have a change of scene. You take time out. Why? Because if you keep doing what you're doing, it's going to be hard to think different thoughts, right? But if you remove yourself, if you have the ability to think about it at that point, I'm getting really angry, let me sit down. Already your thinking mind is engaged. So you are no longer in the hijack. You're no longer only acting from emotion. Already you are applying reason to what is happening to you. Okay? And, of course, the highest level of that is to turn anger into compassion. How do we do that? To turn anger into compassion, again, is not easy. If we practice all of these things regularly, only then we can only have compassion. So say, for example, let's take the example about the child dropping the milk again, right? If we can only have compassion for that child if we have information. If we know that they're really struggling in school, for example, or that they're really trying hard to please us, or that they're nervous about a test, the more information we have about someone, the more compassion we can show them, right? And of course, when we're so spiritually connected to God, then we can automatically show compassion, right? So we all know this beautiful story, but I'll repeat it again, about the slave girl of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, right? So we know that once she was pouring water for the Imam to do wudu, and there are two versions. One says that she hit the Imam by mistake and it hit him, or that she broke the bowl and the bowl was quite precious. It was handed down to him from his grandfather, right? In any case, so he lifts his head, Imam lifts his head, and the girl is very frightened because she thinks that he's going to respond in anger. So she starts quoting the Quran. She says, "And those who control their anger." And Imam says, "I have overcome my anger." And then the little girl says, "And those who forgive people." And Imam says, "I have already forgiven you." And then she recites, "And Allah loves those who are benevolent." And he says, "I have freed you in the way of Allah." Right? So again, this is the highest level, that if somebody does something to us that angers us, instead of reacting in that anger, we actually turn that anger into compassion. Okay? So let's just do a little bit of summary. We've covered quite a bit, right? So how do we manage anger? First of all, to recognize when we're getting angry, to recognize, things that trigger us so that we can learn to manage them better. If we are able to label it, if we're able to say, I'm getting upset, if we talk to ourselves, Labeling again means that our thinking brain is operational. The problem with anger is that it shuts down our thinking brain. When we begin to label our emotions, our thinking brain is still present. And then, in the short term, we either take a time out, or we change positions, or we do some self-talk to calm ourselves down. However, there is something, these are all short-term things, right? Long-term, we need to look after ourselves, because stress and anger, as we know, are extremely related. If we haven't had a good night's sleep, if we have not eaten properly, if we have not looked after ourselves, we're already on edge. Our thermostat is already ready for something to blow up. When we look after ourselves, when we take care of our own needs, then we can, we have a higher level of resilience, right? Again, when we are used to thinking in a way that is helpful to us, when we are used to always reframing the situation, telling ourselves, reminding ourselves of what's important, what God has taught us, and how we need to engage our compassion, and again, problem solving. So instead of getting upset, we need to ask ourselves what needs to change. If we are say for example, if we saw that person always, crossing the red light, the stop sign and not stopping, instead of getting angry and giving him, tickets in our head, which is not going to change anything, if we ask ourselves what needs to change, then we can get into problem solving mode. Does that make sense? So, again, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, protect yourself from anger, for its beginning is insanity and its end is remorse. So again, the idea that before it gets too big, and these things we can practice with little things. Every time we get slightly irritated, if we practice it, it will become part of our, usual routine, rather than just waiting till, dealing with, if we're only using it for that, right? So let's have a salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
So now let's take our hearts and minds to